So next we have Best Narrative, which is only called Best Narrative because there's no better name really for this category. This is a mixture of Best Story, Best Writing, Best Narrative Implementation. I don't know, stuff about story
everything to
and
do with the
writing.
story. Yeah.
Yeah. So here we have Necrobarista, Cloudpunk, Tell Me Why, Paradise Killer, Hades, Haven, Final Fantasy VII Remake in a very specific way is the rating here. Star Wars Squadrons.
Actually, you can probably delete the very specific way thing because we've already talked about it.
We have kind of Star Wars Squadrons and Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah.
Okay, where do we start?
So I'll very, very, very quickly, I can say this and ignore it already. Star Wars Squadron is only there purely because it is good to see people telling nice, isolated Star Wars stories again that are actually good.
Sure.
Because we've gone through a period of time where Star Wars has fucking sucked for ages, and we are now only just started to get good stories like Squadrons, like The Mandalorian, like all this other stuff that is good, isolated Star Wars stories that are nice to well told in the world of Star Wars and actually have cool implications. That's the only thing I wanted to say about Star Wars Squadrons.
Cool.
It's not going to win, but that's it.
It's definitely not, because I was going to say that story's fucking terrible, but okay.
Well, it's good Star Wars.
It's good Star Wars, which
that's what I mean.
We talked about this in the podcast, but it was I was going to have to fight you on that if that was the case.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's not going to win. There's this thing is good Star Wars. That's it.
Necrobarista, we've kind of talked about. The thing for me in this is that the writing has the authenticity of a good. I'm trying to think if there's even an equivalent. It probably kind of isn't.
Young adult novel.
No, because it goes beyond that. It's like it feels modern in a way that's not cringy. Like, people will make references to things that are not just like, hey, look, we referenced that thing. Like, it feels like these are people that live in 2020 but also have all of this other shit on top of them.
You kept sending me screenshots of people talking, and it seemed like legitimate conversation between actual humans, which
in that world is super interesting, but also that's half of it, and then the other half of it as well is when they want to start throwing emotional punches, they land them in really good ways, where it's a really good meditation on the pain of trying to bring somebody back who's long gone. Emotionally, they do it physically, but emotionally, it's dealing with that is they hit that really hard, and it's pretty good. Cloudpunk is probably not going to hang here, but the reason why Cloudpunk is good is because I think we'll talk about this in Cyberpunk as well. They set up this world, or this particular Cyberpunk world, and that whole game is just vignettes. There's not really a through line. It is you're a taxi driver, go immerse yourself in all these people's lives, and there are callbacks, and people will come back round, and people will influence other decisions, and all of this kind of stuff, and it's generally pretty good. Also, the main character, I'm trying to specifically remember, but the main character, I think, basically references, or the main character's origins is influenced by kind of West Asian Asian influences, basically, but of music and clothing and all of this kind of stuff that is super cool and does have an effect on the story, but not in a hey, look, we did this thing way. It just naturally comes out as part of the story.
Yeah.
Even though it's not a real place that they're talking about, they came from. It's quite clear the influences. It's just this super cool thing. And they've just written a bunch of really... that game could be episodic and it would be fine. They're doing lots of little stories. And you look at their Steam page, and I don't actually think... Well, I mean, it's under best game that it's probably not going to win, but the thing they've done with this game that is spectacular is that they have continued to support this game in ways that I've never really seen an art game do, where that game launched and I really enjoyed it, and then they added a first-person mode. And you're this totally recontextual, this makes you experience the city in a totally different way. And then last month they added a cockpit view for the car. So again, you're like, wow, this is a whole different thing again. And then their whole thing is like, yeah, like this is the first chapter of this thing. We're going to write more stories in Nivalis. Like this is our skeleton for a world that we're going to continue to do. And I fully trust them to do that. And it's a really good... And that, like, the story between... The one through line really is between your character and Control, who's like the dispatcher for the taxi company. Like his story is super interesting, and they do good with some of the cyberpunk conceits about the things they want to talk about, and they hit them fucking hard. It's just generally pretty good. I don't know. I like the writing in that game. Tell Me Why is here because it's a really good Don't Nod game. I mean, it's very much in that genre. It's maybe a little more contemporary than something like Life is Strange, where not so much no, I mean, like both Life is Strange games have had like superpowers be a vehicle for the story, where like into it's your brother's telekinesis and all this kind of stuff. But for Tell Me Why, there isn't really supernatural elements except for that the brother and sister can see they are replaying parts of their remembered past, but in a visual way where they're seeing it happen. But it's kind of visually it looks supernatural, but you can see it also as this is what's happening in their head. Also, but the one thing they can do is they can talk to each other without speaking, which is a thing, which is a thing that like twins have theoretically
say that they can do.
But they're doubling down on it for story reasons. But also the thing that makes it really interesting is they've taken that thing and then gone, well, no, these two people have remembered this thing differently, like in really significant ways, and that's kind of the core to the whole story, is that remembering stuff from your past differently has a massive effect on your position in the current day, where you have to just let stuff go if you interpret it in different ways. And also, like, the main thrust of that story resolves like the end of the second. There's 3 episodes. At the end of the second episode, so how do I do this in a really quick way? So the main thrust of the story is that the brother has come out of a juvenile detention center where he's been for 10 years, I think is where it is. He's basically coming out of that. The sister, who still lives in Alaska, goes to get him. They meet up for the first time in 10 years after having kind of interacted a bit. And the story revolves around their childhood home. The sister has been trying to sell the childhood home so that she can move to the city to start a new life, basically. And they want to get him involved so that they can clear it out, get it ready for sale, and move on. But it very quickly becomes about how he ended up in a juvenile detention facility and what happens. And this is like the start of, or like halfway through the first episode, but basically their mother has had kind of mental issues or mental health issues, and the story that's put in front of you is that she lost it one night, threatened to shoot the brother because at that point the brother was, this is before the brother had transitioned, and the brother had cut his hair in a way that was more masculine, and they put this story forward that was like, that was the point where she broke and threatened to shoot him, and the sister comes up or it actually starts where she broke and he stabbed her out of self-defense and she died.
Right, okay.
That's the setup. By the end of the first episode, you realize, no, actually what happened was the sister heard the scream, came up behind and stabbed the mum in the back, and he took the fall for it. So that's the start of the first episode. But very quickly, when you start to, as the story unravels, the whole story is about remembering this stuff differently. So you basically have to make a bunch of decisions that are like, here's the story we're going with, because I remember this and you remember this. We need to choose one of these to say that we believe. And there's no like, and you're right. Like, there's none of that. It's like, you're believing this,
have to carry it.
Go with it. Like, just absolutely take it where it's going. And when you finally see a third or fourth person corroborate parts of that story, it starts to really get super interesting in how they flesh that out with the things you've remembered and the things you've seen. And it has a really, like, most of that thrust that story resolves, or like you get to a point there about a third of the way through the third episode, and then the rest of that episode is you dealing with the fallout of this decision that you've decided is true. Yeah. And it's fascinating, and I don't know how different that thing can go, but it definitely feels like it's not the diamond problem of traditional games of that type, where like there's basically one ending or maybe two that everything points to. It feels like this thing just fans in ways I don't understand how they can do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's nice to see Don't Nod being able to do like a more contemporary story about family and dealing with trauma. And also, like, it feels really weird to say, but like a lot of the not even marketing, a lot of the discussion around this game coming out was the fact that it was the first lead transgender character in a long time in this type of game. And it's almost like, apart from it being the catalyst to the main part of the story, it's not the main part of the story. Yeah, it's used as a natural factor of this life of their lives that then impacts other stuff. And it's just it feels super well handled. The people that I would trust to say whether they handled this right have said they've handled it right. So I'm pretty happy to say that like they've done a good job of it. So yeah, Tell Me Why is really good, one of them. And then Paradise Killer is just, man, is it a narrative? It probably is a narrative, because it's a narrative you discover yourself, and that's the whole game.
Yeah.
But I also really like that
the fact that game has an ending that you can choose to trigger at any moment. So it's very, it gets to the point where it's like you feel like you've done enough, and then you can end it.
Yeah.
Where it becomes almost like a very personal story of like how much work did you actually do. Totally. So it's I would say it's an narrative.
And also, like, on top of all the setup they do of like, they take it's a really complex conceit. Well, it's a really weird conceit that they would have to explain to you, and they do it in such a natural way where you're like, oh yeah, it's the council in the islands, and this is the 13th island, and
the world is so strange, but they do a really weird way of, or a really good job of contextualizing it and kind of explaining it to you.
And it does it really does the thing as well of, what's the other game I'm thinking about where all of this it's got that kind of what was that game with space and the time loop, Outer Wilds. It's got the Outer Wilds thing of like, the whole story's here, like the whole world is here, like you can go anywhere in this world and piece the story together. So like there's the second murder, which is not related to the main murder that's happened. I found that 3/4 of the way through the game. Or you're like, oh fuck. So see, wait.
I found that in the first like 45 minutes.
Exactly. Because you just choose a direction and go. You're right, and you're just like, oh fuck, okay, sure.
I was just looking around for foot baths, and then I found that, and I was like, oh, that's where they ended up. Okay, sure.
So it's a really impressive. Not only is it a good narrative that I enjoyed, and I really like all the writing and the characters. It's an impressive. It's a bold move for them to just go, here's all of it. Like, just go explore, and you'll still come back with a story. Kind of the same as Outer Wilds pulled it off. Hades is.
Is
there a category for most story?
There is a lot of story. Well, there is a lot of story, but there's also incredibly well written and well acted, and voiced, and everything. Like, everything to do with the narrative is very good. But yeah, like I was saying, the story at its heart is a story about how do people reunite, like how do people overcome issues to become a family, to become a couple, to become anything that they could possibly be. But that is like backed up with some very good, like incredibly good character work from every actor in that thing. Like, every character is incredibly distinct and has their own style and view on the world. Zagreus is probably the most endearing character lead in a video game. Like, he, despite starting off like the immediate image you have of him is like, oh yeah, like bratty teenager type that just hates his dad and wants 100%. To leave, but very quickly changes to he's very earnest about everything he does. He's very kind to people. He wants to help them. Like, it is, the character has a lot of layers to them, which is excellent. And even as someone is like what was assumedly one note as like Hades, who is just like, I'm your dad, fuck you, gets like progressively more parts to his character the further the story goes, especially when Persephone comes back. He really opens up and like talks about his life and talks about the gods of Olympus and how they interacted with each other. It's just every avenue of that game has a story to tell, and it is all then, as we've always said, like linked back into the progression of like your actual active work and the escaping of hell.
Yep.
Like everything, like you meet people out in the world in hell that will tie back into stories in the house that will then repeat on, and it's a very well handled story that is told very well and acted incredibly well. Yep. That's what that game has. Is it has a lot of narrative that is excellent and well done. Like that's it's really hard to say otherwise.
This is probably this and Paradise Killer are the ones where the story is very much affected by the mechanics. Like the implementation of story in Hades is like nothing I've ever seen before. Like I've described this before for other games, but it's one of those things where you look at it and go, I don't know how they've done this in a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like this feels uncreatable by human beings that they've pulled this off.
The story is obviously largely told through dialogue, but the dialogue that you get is reflective of your actions in the game, and also like how far you've progressed in other stories, so it can like call back to things. And even like the incidental dialogue is really good as well. Like the little touches of like Zagreus might mention like like how he died the last time that he tried to escape hell, or mention his last encounter with this enemy, or what weapon he was using at the time or something. There are little touches everywhere that is really just sprinkle across this story. And if you're the people, the thing that I can say to Ewan's point about this is the amazing Chris Bratt over at People Make Games. Did a video on the mechanics behind how the dialogue system works in that game, and it is unbelievable how they did that, because it's such a clever system that branches off in so many different ways that all have to be self-referential. It's incredible. It's an incredible feat of engineering just watching that story play out. It's a consistent feeling of like, oh, they did think of that. Okay, like because I'm sure when I was playing it last night was the first time it probably happened before, but it was the first time I registered when I killed an enemy that was the thing that killed me last time, and he goes, "That's for last time." Like it's a 2-second bit of dialogue, but all of those little touches just make it so that it brings
the
world together.
Totally, it feels like this is a consistent thing, and it's not for a game that's so mechanically dense. It manages to hide a lot of that behind the payoff of the narrative and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the story and the writing and the character work and all that stuff.
Haven is really good. I liked it because, again, we kind of said some of this, but the idea that like you are coming into a world that has existed and we're not going to explain it to you. You're gonna have to take this or pick it up as you go along. It does a really good job of explaining a lot of the world of that game in a really cool way. But also just like the dialogue between Yui and Kay is just it just feels, I described it on the podcast as like the first time you go away on holiday with a significant other, and like there are no rules anymore and you're pretending to be grown-ups, and you're like, that's what this feels like, because kind of that's what the story of that thing is in a way. But like, I don't know, it just feels like it's one of the most believable relationships I think I've ever seen in a video game.
Oh yeah.
Because of the way they've written them. And also like, this is true also of Hades, but it has been great to see a couple of games this year be superbly horny, but in really good ways.
Oh yeah.
We're like,
the Hades relationships feel very natural.
Totally.
And there's like there are relationships in that don't even end in relationships, which is even more interesting. Of like, there's a whole side story about like unrequited love and stuff like that. Like
totally.
it's an interesting. Yeah.
And for Haven, like Haven, very very, it hits it much more on the nose. Where you're like, yeah, these two people are on their own, love each other intensely. Like, of course this is going to happen, and they deal with it, and where it becomes a vehicle
very
for
human.
further storytelling as opposed to for like titillation. Like it's really good, and I cannot overemphasize how well they pull that off. Final Fantasy 7, is this just that end bit?
It's that end bit again. It's how that game recontextualizes the narrative of a game that's like 20 years old or however. I think, longer than that, but
I think we can probably put that down because we covered most of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was just there for a check.
Yeah. Cyberpunk's not going to win this, but I feel like it would be amiss to mention that they saved Johnny as a character for me in a way I wasn't expecting, where
sure.
It is not an unusual thing for a video game to have a character who is a complete asshole but then comes good at the end or learns something or resolves. But the thing about Cyberpunk is like he is such an unrepentant asshole at the start that I really did not like him. And you're just like, there's no way you can save this. Like, you've made Keanu Reeves somebody I actively hate. Like, what the fuck have you done?
Yeah.
But what happens then is, like, as that story progresses and you get more of Johnny's internal dialogue and you see stuff from quite literally from his perspective, and you're like, the delivery, the dialogue, all of that stuff coalesces really well into the fact that, like, in a really, really good way until you get to the point where the ending kicks in. And I can't talk about it only because in a first for a video game that I've ever encountered, I need to see more of those endings to know if the ending I got is good. Because I need to know if... Yeah, I can't even explain it without going into the entire fucking end of that game. Fair. But like, if for nothing else, rather than Johnny is real good, and I think there are actually a lot of really good character moments with, like, I really like the stuff early on with Jackie. Like, that stuff feels decent.
The relationship between V and Jackie is really nice. Like, it's a really good relationship between people who are obviously like very good friends with each other. Like, there's a bunch of little moments in Cyberpunk that are all cool stories. Like, there is a bunch of like cool stuff in Cyberpunk that
I like a lot of the characters. I do like I think Takamura is really good as a
Takamura is great.
Both as a character and as a pseudo comedic foil for V.
I
think V's performance is really good. I mean, I was playing as female V, and she did.
Male V is great as well.
Has really good performance. There's a lot of good narrative stuff in there, and again, like, go back and listen to our like hour and a half discussion about Cyberpunk on the podcast. But like, the fact that game doesn't concern itself with, depending on how you want to finish that game up, that game doesn't concern itself as much with like the machinations of the corporations for its own sake. It is really about, this is a world that does not give a fuck about you, deal with it. And the fact that it is about those individual people rather than the more traditional, like, philosophical and political questions about corporations in the cyberpunk world, the fact that it is very much anchored on you as a nobody is, I think, different. And again, it's not the best writing in the game ever. It is not even like revolutionary in any way. I just think like it is a slightly different telling. It is a Hollywood telling of cyberpunk that I think goes further than you would expect it to. And I like it because of that. So, and again, like, kind of like what I said with Cloudpunk, they have built the skeleton of a thing that when they sort themselves out as a fucking studio, everyone has slept for 12 years and they come back and focus that entire studio on, we've built a world and a skeleton, let's build some cool stories. I think that game's going to get spectacular.
Yeah.
in the same way that The Witcher 3 did.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's what happened to The Witcher 3. Yeah. They had DLC and they were all fantastic.
When they can bring that entire studio to bear on a 5-6 hour experience, I think that thing could be spectacular. And I really want to see. Even the ending I got has this really good look at the internals of the corpse, like physically the internals of a corpse, where like I want a undercover working for a corp story in that thing, because like the architecture is incredible, everyone involved is a piece of shit, V doesn't give a fuck. Like there's so many good moments. You could structure an entire bit around that. They haven't touched any of the cyberspace stuff, really. Like you get bits and pieces of it, but like there's a whole world, like all the Beyond the Blackwall stuff. Like you could do some really interesting stuff there. Like they've constructed this world, they could build some really cool stuff on, and I hope they get the chance to, and I hope they do it right and solve all their fucking internal problems to be able to do that. Stop being terrible. Okay, so for this, I am going to guess it's Hades. I am going to guess. What else actually goes?
See, the other ones are all very narrative focused games that I played Paradise Killer, but the other ones I haven't touched, so I can't.
I think Paradise Killer pulls it off because again, that is good writing and performance along with an ambitious mechanic of like, here's all the stuff,
open world, murder exploration.
There's like the idea that you're following threads of which the player can go in any one direction and cross them, and it all still works is pretty great. Man, what's the third one? It's interesting. Is it Barista? Might be Barista. Like I really liked what they did with Tell Me Why, but it's maybe it is. God,
I can't.
I know. I understand this just does. Man, no, the rating Necrobarista is too good.
That was what I was going to say. Is that from the small amount of Necrobarista that I've seen, it seems like they are making an earnest effort in character writing, which I can really understand. Of like, especially speech, of like making them sound like actual people, which is hard to do in a video game.
There's also there's also really good moments where so like as you can basically unlock like side stories, which are literally just like text side stories that are rolled out to you. And one of the series of side stories you get is just of Ashley's journal, and Ashley's the tech person who builds robots. And she has like a 3-part story where she builds a machine that can launch kitchen knives, and the first version launches it so hard that it sticks into the kitchen roof and nobody's noticed yet. And the next 2 versions are her trying to build other machines to pull this kitchen knife out the roof without killing someone.
Excellent.
And it's
cool.
Very good. It's just
amazing.
It's really excellent written. God, is it Hades? It's probably Hades, right?
It's probably Hades, yeah. Like that thing,
because it fulfills every part of this category. Like
it hits everything that you want in the word narrative, like including like strength of writing and delivery, and also flip it back on mechanically how a video game tells a story. That Hades has done something that other roguelikes don't do. And it's incredible.
Okay, as soon as you say that this game tells an excellent story via roguelike, like it kind of has to.
It's insane that you can say that sort of sentence. Yeah.
Okay, let's go with that then. So that's Hades is the best narrative, with Paradise Killer and Necrobarista as runners up. Yeah, believable. I like that.
Yep.